Today we're going to talk about who the great pirate Davy Jones really was, because with the recent reveal that his descendants are Rocks and Blackbeard, there's been a ton of theories recently about what he was actually like, maybe being the opposition to Joyboy, or Joyboy's ally, or even being Joyboy himself. And I even ran a poll about this very question with some pretty interesting results, I might say. So I want to talk about each of these and kind of how I'm seeing the situation as a whole right now, because it is true that in the original legend of Davy Jones, and in most works of fiction including One Piece, Davy is portrayed as being one of the most evil pirates of all time. And Oda even said in an SBS that Davy was so wicked, the devil himself cast him to the bottom of the sea forever. This would certainly make us all think that Davy was a bad guy, and that Blackbeard is kind of carrying that torch now, but we have to remember that a central theme to the One Piece story is you should not always believe what you hear. I mean, if you were to ask a random citizen in One Piece what they thought about Monkey D. Luffy, what would they tell you? That he's a terrifying evil pirate, and probably one that just captured their beloved Dr. Vegapunk, although we know that's not true. And Shanks' crew even went as far to call him a rampaging monkey demon, and obviously they of all people should know better. Even if you were to ask the Elbaf giants about sun god Nika, you would get a ton of different responses. That he's really the god of liberation, or no, he's the god of destruction or laughter. And most people would also call Noland a liar because there's been books spread far and wide about it, but we know that isn't true either. You can just never be certain how accurate the stories are, and countering the narratives and propaganda in the One Piece world is one of the ultimate themes of the story. I mean, pirates are evil and Marines are good has been a global perception that Luffy has continually challenged from the very beginning, and these misconceptions mostly originate because the world government spreads lies to further their grip on the world. So when it comes to Davy Jones, this great supposedly evil pirate from ancient times, what was he really like? Was he truly evil as the rumors say, or could he possibly be a bit misunderstood, or maybe even completely misrepresented? Because with Blackbeard and Rocks being his descendants, who are obviously the antithesis to pirates like Luffy and Roger, it sure seems that Oda wants us to think that he's a bad dude, maybe even being Joyboy's rival, almost like he's the Blackbeard of a bygone era. But another very important lesson in One Piece is that there is no guarantee your offspring will choose the same path as you. And there are no better examples of this than Ace and Luffy, two characters who tie to Blackbeard very, very closely. I mean, Ace and Teach are both the sons of the greatest pirates of the past era, which adds some serious weight to their duel on Bonaro Island, and both even hid their true names, albeit for different reasons. But remember, Ace didn't even like Roger, nor did he ultimately pursue the One Piece for himself like Roger thought he would. Instead, Ace wanted Whitebeard to get it, and Luffy was more so the one who ended up carrying Roger's will. And we know that Luffy and Teach have been two sides of the same coin since the very beginning. And the whole Monkey D family represents what I'm talking about, because all three of them are now members of three separate competing factions in the One Piece world: the Pirates, Revolutionaries, and the Marines. Garps lamented over this fact several times because his child and grandchild took different paths, because much like Roger, he wanted or almost assumed that they would all follow in his footsteps. So just because Blackbeard is evil, or at least is the antithesis to Luffy, does not necessarily mean that Davy Jones had to be evil either. If anything, them being related could just be evidence to the contrary. And if Davy really is one of the greatest pirates ever, that's enough reason right there for the world government to make the stories about him seem terrible, no matter what he was really like. The main thing the government wants is for people to fear pirates. And that's an important point as well, because the sheer fact that Davy Jones was called a pirate tells us that Davy likely could not have existed any earlier than Joyboy, because Joyboy was the first pirate. So I think we can ascertain that Davy Jones at least lived in the same era as Joyboy, so it might just be a lot easier to have them be the exact same person, as it would then mean that Davy Jones is just Joyboy's real name, which is something we, both in terms of this channel and the broader community, have talked about for years at this point. Because where did we first hear about Davy Jones? Well, technically that was Syrup Village, but where we first substantially heard about Davy Jones was Long Ring Longland, a place where everything stretches just like Luffy does, and the reason why is because they all feel free. be. Even when Oda drew this little image of Davy Jones, it was just a pirate-ified version of Tanjin, who we met during that arc as well. And since the Nika fruit was used by both Luffy and Joyboy, it seems to tie Davy Jones and stretching together in a pretty profound way. And another thing is that Oda updated Rock's pirate flag recently from its original design, so now the flames on the skull match much closer to Afro Luffy's chest tattoo, which he obviously wore in the Davy back fights. Plus, Rox's figurehead looks like Brook with a missing afro, which makes me think of Afro Luffy even more, but that's all stuff that I'm going to talk about in a whole separate video pretty soon, because there's just a whole lot to say there. But another reason to believe that this is true is because, like I was saying, Joyboy is probably not his real name. It's probably a nickname, and if his real one is Davy Jones, then Jones would be the name that most people called him originally, which is important because Jones also starts with J-O just like Joyboy does, and we already know an important character who adds boy onto people's names in Ivankov, a person who's been very relevant in God Valley as well, the land of the Davies. So if Jones had met a past version of Ivankov, that might be where the name Joyboy originated, and this would almost create like two different identities, where the name Davy Jones was spread far and wide as the strong evil pirate due to all the propaganda, much like we've seen with Luffy, and this may be what's even necessitated the use of the name Joyboy, so that people who read the poneglyphs wouldn't immediately judge a book by its cover. And we've also seen Luffy use fake names several times in the series, often ones that are spin-offs of his real name, with Lucy in Dressrosa probably being the best example, and maybe even Luffy Taro in the early parts of Wano. Even today, the Wano citizens are being taught that Joyboy saved them all and not Monkey D. Luffy, so he's also kind of utilizing that nickname even if he doesn't know it. And with this new context, I think it's kind of interesting to go and look back at Oda's SBS answer where he explained who Davy Jones was, because one of the first things that Oda says is that Davy was a lying no-good deck chief who put all of the crew's valuables in his own locker, which is the origin of Davy Jones' locker. And in One Piece, we know that the greatest treasure in the world, the One Piece, has something to do with Joyboy and was left on a secret island known as Laugh Tale. Perhaps the treasure being referenced here is the One Piece, meaning it's been left in Davy Jones' locker this entire time. And then Oda went on to say that Davy was so wicked, even for a pirate, that one day the devil himself cast him to live on the bottom of the sea forever. But if he was an evil pirate, then why would the devil do this? Wouldn't the devil cheer on all of these evil acts? Perhaps it's because Imu, probably being the devil in this scenario with all the demonic themes we've seen so far from them, cast Davy down there because they were opposing forces. And then this SBS ends by saying that Davy would be swabbing the deck of a sunken ship and placing all the sunken treasures into his own locker, where it would never be seen again. And I think that's very interesting because barely anyone has seen the One Piece. Only Roger has made it there in 800 years, and even he said he was too early, which tells us there's even more to the situation than what Roger saw. If you assume that Davy was Joyboy, then this whole passage almost reads like Imu was salty that Davy had the One Piece and sunk him to the bottom of the sea for it. And perhaps this could also be a hint that Imu can't just go steal that treasure back for some reason, perhaps meaning that Davy Jones' locker is somewhere Imu cannot access. But if this was all true, then what would it mean for the dynamics of the past as far as the various factions go? Because even if Davy Jones is Joyboy, I do still agree that there needs to be an actual evil or antagonistic pirate figure opposing him. Because I mean, Rox had Roger, Luffy has Blackbeard, there probably had to be another pirate back then who opposed Joyboy. But with the way that a lot of the things are shaping up here in the final saga, I think many of these parallels are beginning to come clear, where Luffy is the Joyboy of the past, the Ancient Kingdom is the world government of the past, being an oppressive system that needed abolished, the 20 Kings and Imu were probably like the Revolutionary Army or Dragon of the past, basically being a group of allied countries challenging the status quo, because even Dragon has amassed several different countries to join him in the revolution. But then who would be the antithesis to Joyboy? basically being the Blackbeard of the past. Because like we were saying, Davy Jones seems to kind of be depicted like this person, but if that's truly Joyboy, then who's filling the role of Blackbeard? Well, if it's not gonna be Davy Jones, then I think a really good guess is actually Vander Decken the First. Vander Decken the Ninth's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa, because from what we know, he fits many of the same tropes you would expect from Davy Jones, mainly because it was said he was punished by the gods to roam the bottom of the sea for all eternity, and even his descendant continues to do so today on the Flying Dutchman. And while a lot of the Pirates of the Caribbean fans out there might immediately draw connections between Davy Jones and the Flying Dutchman, the original legend did not tie those two together. The most widely accepted origin of the Flying Dutchman is of a Dutch captain from the 17th century named Hendrik van der Decken. So Oda's drawing on the original myth here, where the Pirates of the Caribbean kind of made their own version. But in One Piece, the original Vander Decken was made out to be this deranged, evil pirate who threw all of his crew overboard. And while Papag seemed to kind of pump the brakes on this a little bit by saying that legends do grow with time, which is kind of the same message as this entire video, Vander Decken was definitely crazy and did die on Fishman Island in his pursuit of Poseidon. Now, one thing is we don't exactly know when Vander Decken was around. We were just told it was a vague centuries ago. And logistically speaking, his descendant only being the 9th would make it kind of hard for him to be back in the Void Century, because it would mean that each generation had to take 100 years since the Void Century was 900 years ago. And I think that's a little hard to reconcile unless a giant is somewhere in his ancestry or we have some Toki shenanigans, but thematically it would definitely make a lot of sense he'd have been around back then, because Poseidon existing is what brought him down to the seafloor in the first place, and that automatically makes you think Void Century. Now, we did hear from the Sea Kings that Poseidon reincarnated every century, so it could have been more recent, but either way, I think he's a figure we should expect to have a much bigger role in the past than he does right now. Especially because who did Vander Decken end up working with during Fishman Island? Davy Jones. And I don't think it's a coincidence at all that Oda made the villain of Fishman Island someone named Jones, since this was all at the bottom of the sea. In fact, there was a couple great videos recently, one by Luna PN Art, aka Dawn and Dusk, that covered this Davy Jones thing specifically, as well as a video by Decken where he took this Vander Decken thing in a totally different direction than me, so I'll leave a link down below for those in case you're interested. But with the way Vander Decken and Davy Jones ended up clashing by the end of the arc, and the fact that Davy Jones was kind of using him all along, like they weren't really friends or anything, I think that might be a hint that Davy Jones and Vander Decken were actually mortal enemies in the past. And you know, there could be a very cool connection here to Blackbeard, because Caribou is about to spill the beans to him about where Poseidon is. So if Teach goes there and tries to steal her, that would really build on their potential parallel. And this could even tie to Shiarli's prophecy about Luffy destroying the island, because with Katarina Devon's ability, she could maybe copy him and infiltrate, which is a theory that's been around for a very long time now. But regardless of the Vander Decken stuff, if Davy Jones was actually Joyboy, then I think the idea here is that Oda is using him as kind of the perfect representation of this pirate perception dichotomy, where the very same person is simultaneously the savior and the most dangerous of all time, kind of like Luffy is considered now with the way that the world views him. And who better to be this inspiration for all the pirates than the first pirate ever, who may also be the greatest pirate, as he's almost the progenitor of piracy as a whole. It's basically the very same idea as Sun God Nika and Elbaf, where the giants are debating whether Sun God Nika is the god of liberation or destruction or laughter. They've each kind of formed their own view on what Nika was really like based off the same exact stories. As Jarl even said, who can say if he was the world's savior or the great destroyer who brought it all crashing down? It's all just about your perception of things. Like, even if Luffy and Blackbeard were to fight each other tomorrow, I don't think the world is really gonna want either of them to win, because they are both roughly the same to them. To them, they are both like a Davy Jones kind of guy, even though we know they are very, very different. And this would be a great way to tie into the Morganeer and Peace main thing that Oda mentioned back in his one-shot Romance Dawn, where Morganeers are the bad and selfish pirates, and Peace mains are just out there to have fun and adventure, because Blackbeard and Luffy obviously represent each separate side of that equation respectively, and if both sides of it originated from the same original pirate, that makes the fact they're two sides of the same coin even more compelling, especially because Blackbeard would be the descendant of Joyboy, while Luffy is the one inheriting his will. It's his relative versus reincarnation. Which side is gonna win, his family or the kid who acts like him? And I think there could even be a very powerful angle here where being related to Joyboy is exactly the reason Blackbeard ended up being so much different than him, because of all the persecution they faced. Like, being a Davy member probably caused them to be chased by the government and outcast by society, almost like the Kurozumi in Wano. And look how much that corrupted Orochi, or at least made him easy to corrupt. Because there's no doubt that this God Valley incident is gonna weigh on Blackbeard heavily, right? I mean, look at him in this panel. He's in shock hearing how many people want to kill him and the people he loves. So in some ways, Joyboy's descendants may have been screwed from the very start just because they were related to him. No matter what strength they got from that lineage factor, or potentially weird bodies like Blackbeard has, they would never be able to make up for it, as the world was gonna warp them one way or another. And that could be part of the reason that negative stories of Davy Jones were allowed to exist. It made it easier for the government to go chase after Davy members, just as they have with Lunarians or Buccaneers and so forth. And this has led to not only fewer members of the Davy family being out there, but it would also help corrupt the ones who did make it, because the world would help them do so. Which just goes to show how important inherited will is to the story. I mean, Dragon did say it's one of the three things that can never be stopped. And so that's why I think Davy Jones will end up being Joyboy and he won't be as evil as they say, but I also want to spend a while talking about Davy potentially being Joyboy's crewmate or ally instead. Because I was surprised to see that on that poll I mentioned earlier, that option actually finished in first place, even above Davy Jones being an evil pirate in the same vein as Blackbeard. But after thinking about it for a while and looking through your comments, there is a lot of potential here as well. Because one thing that a number of people mentioned is that if Davy Jones was a crewmate or ally to Joyboy, maybe he betrayed him much like Blackbeard betrayed Thatch while on Whitebeard's crew. I mean, that's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, crew betrayal in the story. And doing this is a massive, massive crime on a pirate ship. It would almost be like a Judas and Jesus type situation. And this could be exactly why he's just considered so evil now. And maybe it wasn't even that Davy Jones did this on purpose, because with the Domi Reversi ability now in the story, there's a whole lot of new potential here for what it means for Davy, or Joyboy, or even the entire Void Century. Maybe Davy was turned evil and then he attacked Joyboy, so again, we just have a messed up perception of him because people would see him as this terrible guy, even though he was being controlled, kinda like King Riku in Dressrosa. And this is why I really like this comment on the poll from Camel King Clarith, which was that after Joyboy's crewmate got Domi Reversi'd, Joyboy created something to undo it, which became a Davy back fight because he was fighting to take Davy back. And I love this because while we already know Davy Jones is tied to the Davy back fight very closely, we don't really know why the back part is in the name. Like, yes, you can take someone's crewmate if you win, but taking them back would almost feel like you're returning them to the original place. And I remember bringing something like this up a long time ago in my first Lafro Tale video, but with Domi Reversi now in the story, this seems like a very, very plausible option. And so maybe Joyboy ended up losing this Davy back fight somehow, and that's just how the Void Century ended. And as for why either of them would have agreed to this kind of thing, I think Emu would, if it was the case that Joyboy was just too strong to beat by normal means, because I mean, look how bad Emu was sweating just at Joyboy's rope hockey. And then as for Joyboy, well, if Luffy's any indication, then he might just agree for the fun of it or for the pirate honor. But it could also be that he just didn't want to risk fighting Emu and thus putting his friend in harm's way while he was being controlled. Kind of reminds me of when Luffy didn't want Marguerite to break when fighting the Boa sisters. Or maybe it was the case that Joyboy needed Emu to cooperate in order to undo the Domi reversey, sort of like how Boa had to undo the petrification, or even how we needed the antidote to undo the ice Oni virus in Wano, and that necessitated Joyboy needing to get Emu on his side. This would give both of them a legit reason to agree to this, as Joyboy needed a way to save his friend, and Emu needed a way to actually take down Joyboy. And so after Emu won somehow, which I wouldn't be shocked if it was through some underhanded means, then Joyboy probably just had to give in, and this could even be why there's a giant straw hat now up in Marijois. But all in all, this mystery of Davy Jones is sure to be a major plot point going forward, and I'm really excited to see what Oda's cooking. But that is it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to hit like on the video before you get out of here, and let me know down below where you're at on this whole Davy Jones situation, because it does feel like a bit of a toss-up with a lot of strong possibilities. But I hope you all have a great day, and until next time, later.